Everybody, and welcome to today's Cabinet meeting, the first of the new year, but also, of course, the first of the new decade. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Hopefully everybody had a nice Christmas, opportunity to relax and be with family. But we're back to work now with a healthy and significant agenda, which will start agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Ray Evans and Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you. Those to be noted. Declarations of interest. I want to declare an interest in regard to the Youth Justice Plan. I do appear from time to time in the Youth Court, and also I'd like to declare an interest in item 9, the school funding formula. My wife is a primary school teacher in Telford Wrekin, although I don't think it has a pecuniary interest, but for transparency reasons, I would like to declare those interests.
Similarly, I'd also like to declare an interest in item 9, the school funding formula. My daughter is a teacher in the local primary school, but I don't believe that is a pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. Andrew?
Yeah, I just wondered if I should declare an interest in school transport. My sister works in that department.
Well, you don't have a vote in Cabinet meeting, do you?
No, that's okay, is it?
You're only here to observe.
I thought I'd check anyway.
Thank you very much. Right, those could be noted. We'll then move on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. Have a proposal for those. I'll sign those, thank you very much. And item 4, financial management 2019-2020. Councillor Carter.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I'll be brief for this one. This is a report about our in-year performance and some projections to the out-turn position for the end of this current financial year. I'm pleased to say it's an excellent, good, solid start to the year in terms of report, because it reports that we are projected to be within budget by the end of the year. That's a significant achievement given the financial circumstances and uncertainty within which we operate. You don't have to cast your eyes too far away to see that there are authorities who are in year finding black holes that are worth millions of pounds that they've unforeseen and having to implement emergency spending controls. We're not in that position here. The current projection is that we will still have 2 million of contingency available at the end of this financial year. And the positive position has been very much as a result of two things. First of all, the savings and efficiencies and new income that we've generated, which totals 6.1 million within the year, and a benefit of 3.1 million from Treasury Management. As usual, and it's been well reported on a number of occasions, we've still got cost pressures within children's safeguard and family support, which is a key pressure area. Adult social care, again, is a pressure area, as is the small pressure area within education and corporate parenting. I think obviously we'll talk more about the future strategy in the next item, but I cannot give enough credit to Ken, Pauline and the whole team at Telford Wrekin for establishing over a long period of time, almost a decade now, this firm financial foundation that we've been able to build on and still retain a progressive outlook. So I'd just like to move the recommendations, if I could, please.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Second that.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments or questions or points from the Cabinet members concerned? No? Any comments for yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, just general comments really about the it's the same old areas that are causing problems and pressures within the budget. I just wonder whether we need to start forecasting what they're likely to be, because the amounts are quite large. I know we've got the savings plans coming through, but I do wonder whether we ought to take a different approach rather than putting reserves or topping it up with reserves, to actually look at putting what we think the actual problems are going to be. I would hope, and I've said before about adult social care, that I really do hope that we start to get some movement from central government on that, and would welcome at long last a green paper which would no doubt help us, or hopefully help us square the circle with that. There is another concern I've got, just going into Appendix 2, and it's on page 18, the top of page 18. Just wondering if you could have more information on that, about the 334k contribution from the CCGs that we were talking about. I also note a sort of worry about aspirations in the leisure side of the council's business at the moment. When we're saying aspirations is going to generate 1.5 million, I just wondered what the profit or anything was on that. And I accept the difficulties of that. Certainly the competition from outside and private companies is quite a growth area, I think, across the country, let alone Telford. So there's a couple of queries around that. Just a comment on staffing. Again, I understand the recruitment problems with that. If we could get rid of agency appointments, I think that would help us no end, but I accept that that's, in circumstances, is going to be a difficult thing to do.
Some pertinent points raised there in terms of the safeguarding budget. Obviously, we do regularly work on demand and try and model what that demand looks like. But unfortunately, austerity has driven demand even beyond the best projections and models of projection, and that goes for adult social care too. In terms of leisure, I think one of the key things that always comes back from our residents is that they are very proud and pleased that we've retained aspirations and all of our leisure facilities within council control. We continue to do that. You're quite right in pointing out that there is demand and competition within that market, particularly in the gym sector. However, we've stood up to that competition really and continue to generate millions of pounds from that area to invest into frontline services like adult social care and children's safeguarding.
Lovely. Right, that has been moved, that has been seconded. All that. No, sorry.
If I can, the issue over the CCG contribution. If I could have an answer on that.
We'll provide information on that. Thank you.
Okay.
All those in favour? That's everybody, thank you very much. Now moving on to item 5, which is the Service of Financial Planning 2020-2021. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, just a little explanation as to why we're against tight timescales here. Government effectively provided us with some information at 4:30 on the last working day before Christmas, which is ridiculous given we're running a £400 million gross organisation here. We are still waiting information on public health grant and 5 other grants, and so obviously this is a bit of a moving feast, but effectively what we're presenting today is our draft budget for the next year, which effectively sets out our intentions. Obviously, just to look back a few months, 2019, obviously we secured, as a Labour administration, secured an overwhelming victory, probably the biggest victory in a quarter of a century, and it was built on one of the most comprehensive, positive, progressive manifestos that's ever been launched locally by in Telford Wrekin by the Labour Party. The Leader will talk more about how we will achieve that later on in the agenda. Whilst that election victory was built on that manifesto was firmly based on the financial reality within which we operate, and it was built on the firm financial foundations that this Labour administration has built during its period in control of the council. Whilst we promised to protect, care and invest to create a better borough, we also always have a promise, a cast iron promise, to run the authority in a prudent way. External professional observers have long praised the authority for the foresight and fortitude it's shown in managing the council's finances during a decade-long programme of austerity from the Conservative government. Just to remind people what that turned out to be in reality in terms of our finances. So since 2010, the government has reduced funding to local councils by 82%. The government has not announced a long-term comprehensive spending review since 2015, and as a result we've been forced to make £123 million worth of savings in that time, which is equivalent to £1,600 for every household in the borough. The government now provides less than 8 pence in every pound we spend in our net budget through the revenue support grant. Whilst we have maintained council tax at the lowest level across the West Midlands and amongst the lowest in the country, the council now receives £67 million from council tax revenue. However, the cost of adult social care and children's safeguarding alone now totals £79 million, with continuing pressure in those areas as I talked about earlier. The total income from council tax, business rates and revenue support grant now only covers roughly 4/5 of the council's total spend. And whilst recently we've seen words that suggest an end to austerity, we've not necessarily seen the deeds from the government, and we still continue to operate in an uncertain time in terms of how we will be funded beyond 2021. And the government themselves continually extend that uncertainty by kicking that can down the road. However, internally we continue to deal with this uncertainty in the following ways. First, we continue to use capital investments to generate returns and additional income to invest in frontline services. and within the proposals we do plan an extended capital programme. However, and as long being the case, this is planned over a longer time period, a longer horizon, in order to retain flexibility. We also continue to keep available as much of one-off resource as is sensible in order to meet the cost of day-to-day pressures. And thirdly, we continue on a regular basis to identify efficiencies and savings that can be made across the authority. And as I talked about earlier, we've got an exceptional track record in securing those efficiencies and or generating new income, but at the same time protecting frontline services. To any of the media here and to anyone else, a key challenge to any opposition member critiquing this strategy has to be, if not this strategy, then what? And you must have a careful eye on how they would themselves change the balance of the three things that I talked about. For instance, less capital programme, more use of one-off resources can only equal more savings. And if they're proposing more savings, then what would they save? How and when would they save it? And will it meet the scale that's big enough to bridge that budget gap? As I talked about, despite this uncertainty, we do remain positive and true to our protect, care and invest commitments that we set out in May. Some of the headlines from the revenue budget that are contained within the report. An increased investment of 34 million into children's safeguarding. That's an increase of 2.9 million. Increased investment of 45 million into adult social care. That's an increase of 3.9 million. And we also set out increased investments into housing initiatives and a new fund to help pump prime our climate change initiatives, as well as extra increased investment into small, locally focused environmental pride schemes. And one of the things that we've been really proud of is delivering some of those small tasks which often mean so much to local streets and neighbourhoods. That's total investments of over £7 million. To help fund this, we will look to make further savings and generate new income of 3.3 million next year and 4.5 million the year after. We will use just over 1 million of one-off resources to help balance the budget. We also outline proposals for a general council tax increase of 1.99%, raising £1.34 million. The government also assumes an increase in the adult social care precept of 2%. For anyone who thought those promises by Boris didn't come with a cost, they do. However, this precept increase will raise 1.35 million, and that will all be ring-fenced for adult social care. And for the most observant amongst you will see that this Labour Council proposes a total extra investment 3 times the amount raised by the adult social care precept. Despite this increase, we envisage Telford Wrekin retaining amongst the lowest council tax rates in the West Midlands and unitary authorities across the country. Within the report, we also set out a capital programme which is extended but is set out over a longer period of time than the strategy, 3 years rather than a 1 year revenue strategy that we can contain within a report. The headlines from this are 60 million for a new property and housing regeneration investment fund to help enable further long-term investments. Those investments will be in new homes for rent for residents, attracting new jobs, creating positive conditions for businesses to stay, grow or relocate to our borough. These are 3 elements that the council has an exceptional track record in, particularly through New Place, the Telford Wrekin Growth Fund and the land deal. Profits from these investments will be used to help fund key frontline services, including adult social care and children's safeguarding. They will also generate additional council tax, new homes bonus and business rates, which again will be useful in terms of supporting those essential frontline services. The proposed capital programme will also see further amounts invested into an extension of the council's Pride programme, including 5 million for regeneration of our borough towns and high streets, £12 million for further improvements to our roads, footpaths, cycle paths and car parking provision, £5 million for environmental improvements and £4 million for improvements to and maintenance of bus shelters, bridges and retaining walls. Finally, there will be an additional £2 million available as a contingency in both 2021-22 and 22-23 to fund additional priorities such as reducing the council's carbon footprint and partnering with government and others. We believe that this report represents robust, thorough and a diligent approach to our finances, whilst at the same time protecting, caring and investing in our wonderful borough. I would like to move the recommendations within the report.
Thank you. I'd be happy to second it as the co-reporter, Arthur. Any comments or questions from Cabinet members? No? Andrew, anything for yourself?
Well, it's very difficult when you've just been handed the report itself, of course.
Christmas.
It was ever thus.
Wow.
In fact, I know that they've come in far later than that. And have a cabinet meeting here at 11 o'clock and then be given this weighty document like that to go through, then it's not possible to comment. There is, however, one item there I will ask for some thoughts upon, and that's the single status pot, which from memory had slightly under £12 million of public money sitting in it. This has been dragging on for many, many years, and we need to resolve that. And I would accept that my administration didn't resolve it either. We're very keen to do so. It has dragged on. It is a lot of public money sitting there doing very little except gathering interest, and it does need resolving. Now, I see a brief mention in there of something in 2021. It would be nice to see a timetable actually set and kept on this issue, because many targets seem to have come and gone. It is a lot of money sitting there, and it is a lot of money we could use in one-offs to spend on the local community.
I'd like to say that I really want to endorse this budget plan. It is a plan that puts our manifesto right at the heart of what we are going to be doing over the next 4 years. We had the biggest electoral mandate since this council was created, and that was based upon 3 words: protecting for this borough, investing in the borough, and caring for the borough. And this is a budget plan that does all 3 of those things. It protects services that in many areas of the country councils have ditched or privatised years ago. Our ice rink, our leisure offer, our Southwater, our support for the high streets, our support for schools, our support for roads and footpaths. It also cares for some of the most vulnerable people in our borough. It protects funding for the Citizens Advice Bureau. It protects funding for the food bank. It protects funding for homelessness charities, and it also guarantees that if you are vulnerable in this borough, that this council will do everything it can to act as the shield, which is almost dented beyond recognition, but a shield nevertheless that we hold up to protect our communities from the pain of a Conservative government that doesn't give a damn about the poorest, the most vulnerable. It also, in my respectful opinion, is a budget that others have copied, and a budget and a strategy that others have tried to replicate. You don't have to look too far away from our own boundaries as a council to see those councils now looking at ways in which they can build houses to rent, build houses to sell. Look at councils who are trying to do partnership deals in the same way that we have done. But we aren't complacent. This is a budget that takes us forward over the next 4 years. We're going to talk about the manifesto in a moment or two, but I do think it's a budget that does it all it can to make our borough a better place. So I'd like to commend Lee, all cabinet members, all officers for putting this together. We now go out for consultation and we stand ready to listen to views of our residents. It has been moved, it has been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much then. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, John, which is the report in regards to the manifesto update, item 6. I'm delighted that myself as leader of the council I'm taking personal responsibility to ensure that this manifesto is delivered. It is a programme over the next 4 years, but very much the minimum that we want to achieve as a administration. This report will be a report that comes regularly to Cabinet to report on our achievement to deliver those commitments. Over 100 commitments were provided for. I'm delighted that 33% of those commitments have already been completed. We have got a further 58% of those commitments underway, and I hope to be able to report progress in regards to those, and 9% are partially completed, on course to being completed over the next few months. People who've read the manifesto will know that it's a detailed, costed document which really sets the ambitions of the administration. I think it's fantastic that our baseline position is not a poor one. Since 2011, since Labour took control of this council, we've put the council on a secure financial footing despite the cuts from government, and we've also invested and achieved much. But there's more we want to do. So, for example, the National Agritech Park, Park in Newport, the first agritech complex of the whole of the country, is now well underway to deliver high quality jobs for the people of Telford Wrekin and in particular Newport. I'm delighted that 800 people now live in a new place property, having the security of knowing that their landlord is the council, and we've got plans to extend New Place further, which I'm really looking forward to. We've got a really positive set of news from government and others that say we are got some of the most active communities in the region, and that the improvements in regards to that are really positive too. But there are challenges. We know there are challenges in terms of funding adult social care and safeguarding children, but I was delighted that we were able to secure a place on the Department for Education's best practice model, which will see further investment matched by this council to safeguard and improve those services. I just want to say finally that this is very much a team effort. Actually, it's not just about cabinet members, although cabinet members play an incredibly important part. It's also about Labour members of the administration, the Labour group holding us as a cabinet to account, and it's also, of course, it's about our senior management team being in place to deliver against this set of ambitious programme. So I'd like to propose the recommendation as stated in the report. Can I have a second? Thank you. Any comments or questions?
I mean, I'd just like to say, we won a massive majority in May, and we continue to deliver on this manifesto. But as Leah said, with the budget, it gets harder every year with the cuts we have to make. But we do invest in our borough towns. We do invest in our roads and footpaths. And as cabinet member for neighbourhoods, it's key that we keep our neighbourhoods safe, clean, and well connected. And we will continue to try and work as well as we can with our communities to make that happen, because it is the environment that people see. I said in my when I was given this role that I wanted to see Telford Wrekin cleaner and greener, and that's what we're trying to do. But also we need to have that connectivity to make it work for business, to make it work for people in their leisure interests as well. And improving health and well-being has been a key commitment to our Green Guarantee as well, making this borough a great place to work and do business and to live, and I'm proud to have lived here all my life, and I'm great to see this manifesto implemented by this Labour administration.
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, really, in terms of health and the crisis that this area is facing in terms of health services at the moment, how much this council is doing to protect its residents despite that crisis. You'll have read in the report that this council is now ranked top for improving the number of people classified as active for 2 consecutive years, top in the country. That's one measure of just how much we're doing to offset the crisis that people are facing in terms of health services here. We're also in the top percentages in the country in terms of our effectiveness for getting people discharged from hospital on time. We're doing our bit. We've got a partnership locally with an integrated partnership with health service and voluntary sector colleagues, which is proving very effective on the ground. All these things show that we're maximising what we can do. It doesn't do more than mitigate the worst effects of some of the people are experiencing with health, but it does show that we're doing the best to protect our residents, and that's a vein. That kind of principle runs through, I think, everything that this council is doing, to protect its residents.
Thank you, Andy. Any other comments, Shirley?
Just a small point, really, and I think it was alluded to earlier. Obviously, my portfolio area, I do appreciate, takes an awful lot of our budget, but I wouldn't want it any other way, because I know this administration will do absolutely everything it can to protect care and invest for his residents. And yes, at times we are a victim of our own success with our education. As it was mentioned to me this morning, our primary schools, 93% are good or outstanding, which is an amazing achievement for our authority. Families do want to live here because of how this administration looks after them. Just our local libraries, we're one of the few authorities in the whole country. We're not cutting services like that. We work with our partners to protect and to keep our infrastructure as good as we can for all our residents. So yeah, I was delighted and proud of the achievement in May, and I think that is just testament to what we've done in the previous administrations, and the local people trust us to continue and move that forward.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No. Andrew, any comments on this?
No.
No. Lovely. Well, we'll get on and deliver our manifesto. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item number 7, which is our housing investment programme update. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to reflect on a couple of comments from previous reports. Firstly, we can see that a huge portion of the budget is targeted towards adult social care and in terms of caring for people and children's services. So what we have to do is innovate, and the next 2 reports focus on how we're innovating as a council to deliver our priorities outside of those budget pressures, and that's part of being a business winning council, and it's part of being an authority that responds to the needs of its residents. This report is focused on the housing investment programme that Councillor Carter mentioned in his financial report, and particularly focuses on New Place Limited, which is, as you know, the council's wholly owned housing company, which was incorporated in April 2015. And the report gives an update on achievements over the last year and commitment to ongoing development. New Place's housing portfolio has now increased to 329 homes over the past year, and 44 of those are affordable homes. We have a development of a further 91 properties that have commenced across 2 sites in Snedshill and Dot Hill, bringing New Place's portfolio to 420 by 2020. 19 of these homes provide specialist housing dwellings, and they are located on a site next to the Princess Royal Hospital, and that provides high quality housing choices for people with a range of mobility issues. Also, in relation to that site, we've done and created a partnership with the local hospital where we're providing an early bird scheme for health service workers so that they have an opportunity to get themselves onto the housing ladder through a New Place property, which is obviously very close to our local hospital, and that's a great partnership that we're undertaking with the local health service. We have a growing portfolio right across the borough in North and South Telford, and affordable homes too in Newport, and we want to continue to expand our activity and make sure that New Place provides a beacon really about how you can provide, manage and support people in their homes, and it also provides a good example to other landlords across the borough, and shows that we have a high quality offer in relation to the service that the company provides. As the leader mentioned earlier, we've got 800 people, over 800 people now living in New Place properties across 7 sites. And the report does include some interesting testimonials from people who are living in New Place homes. And one of the things that strikes me is when you go out and talk to residents, which I do, who live in New Place homes, they're delighted by both the quality of the homes and also the security that's provided by knowing that they're living in a New Place property, which is underpinned by the local authority in terms of the housing company structure. In terms of development, we brought 23 acres of brownfield land back into development and regenerated those areas, and those sites might have otherwise been blighted if New Place hadn't been the route through which those sites came forward for development. And we are bringing forward a supply chain of development going forward and linking those up to community-based projects. Now, I think it's fair to say in the early years of New Place we focused on housing that would be based upon general needs. And that is something that most large-scale landlords do. They build up a portfolio of properties, and the company's built up a portfolio of properties focused on general needs. What we're doing now is we're expanding our activity to look at supported housing and to look at a wider range of needs within our community, and that's something that we're very keen to do in future developments. Since 2015-16, New Place has generated a cumulative net incremental income of £3.2 million to the council. And the council also benefits from council tax and new homes bonus as appropriate levels of housing stock are delivered. And this is estimated to have generated 526,000 since 2016-17, and that will rise to £700,000 by 2019-20. Looking forward, as I've said, we want to do more to identify supported housing opportunities, and we're looking to deliver a further 50 homes on sites currently identified, and we will bring a further report through to Cabinet in the spring, setting out our proposals for a further expansion of the scheme and laying out how we intend to continue to grow New Place as an opportunity both for the council and for local residents.
Thank you, David. Lee, anything for yourself on this?
No, just to echo some of what David said, it's one of the it should be one of the proudest achievements of this local authority. Actually, if you think about the sort of foundation principles, building on land that was derelict, could have been a blight on the community, brownfield sites that the private sector didn't want to touch, providing income to the council, a sustainable income source, but most importantly, a good solid home for people right across the borough with a good solid landlord. You know, a lot of what we talk about and will talk about today is about resilience with our communities, and providing people with a good house from which to base their lives is one of the most important building blocks for building that resilience within communities. The business model shows it's successful in terms of not just in terms of the ongoing income it generates for us, but things like the voids, the low level of voids, which shows that it's an excellent product. Once people get in there, they want to stay in there. And the model itself is resilient also. It's resisted calls from some to sell it off to the first bidder, regardless of what they come along offering. Long may it continue, long may we continue to invest in it. I think it's fantastic.
Any other comments? Richard?
Yeah, I mean, having been involved in the housing investment programme, I think it's remarkable how well it's taken off, and the comments from residents show that, and also from the enforcement point of view, you know, raising the standards of the private sector housing in this town is good for everybody. It makes private landlords have to take notice and step up to the plate as well to keep their tenants happy, and that's what we need in this town. We need good private landlords as well as social landlords, but we need them to have good housing and look after their tenants, and New Place has made that mark, and I'm really proud how it's delivering, and the comments in the report from people who live in New Place show how they value the council being their landlord.
Thank you very much. Andrew, any observations for yourself?
Yes, I've got some comments I want to make on this. I certainly welcome development of brownfield sites. I think that was one of the key drivers of this. I know there's 23 acres there. Have we any idea what percentage that is of the total sites that have been developed, or the total land that's been developed? I also quite like the early bird scheme as well. I think that is a good scheme. Although we must note, of course, that was built on a greenfield site, and I think that was a great pity in itself. The supported housing you mentioned, well, I look forward to that, to see what's going to come out, what thoughts you have around supported housing, because I think there are great opportunities for this authority to provide, as you say, a trusted brand, certainly towards social care, and whether there are opportunities in that general direction. As for the number of affordable units, or certainly the percentage of 10.5%, I think that's too low, and I think the council really, as a landlord, should be aiming for a much higher percentage than 10.5% affordable in the community.
Thank you. Any points, David?
Well, just to come back on those 3 points. What I would say is that, as I indicated in my opening remarks, most landlords who are building up a portfolio will focus initially on general needs housing to provide that solidity in the stock base, and I know that Andrew will be aware of that. I agree with him in some senses. We do need to do more on affordable homes, and what I've said very clearly is that we want to increase the level of affordable homes on future site delivery. But what you have to do is build a base of rental income that's firm and solid on general needs housing, and I think we probably agree on that. So, but I do want to expand the level of affordable units that are available on sites, and we've started to do that. And the site near the Princess Royal Hospital is one of those examples. I understand that was HCA land actually that came forward. So, but it was part of a wider deal for regeneration around Wellington and Dot Hill. But I think if you go and visit the site, what we have done there is we have retained quite a green feel to that site. So there are TPOs. It's developed around 2 or 3 very mature trees. We've done as best we can to protect green space within that environment. But it's fantastic that it's close to the hospital, and we have done a really good deal on an early bird offer. And I think going forward we might be able to do further deals with the health service to actually provide them with accommodation directly to rent to hospital employees, and that's one of the things we'd like to develop with the scheme. It's really good. It provides a firm base for health service workers coming forward. We did promise a few years ago that we'd do more to try and support our hospital by using every lever we could as a council to provide accommodation and facilities to support staff that we desperately need to protect the services there are in our local hospital. In terms of supported housing, I'm keen to come back in the spring with the further report that I've suggested. I'd like us to look at particular distinct supported housing models, and I think this ties in with the need to expand and explore the whole gamut of issues around social care and moving people into appropriate accommodation. I think there's an opportunity for us to do that, whether that be as part of this company or whether it be through a different structure. I'm keen to do that. I want, again, to bring forward a wider report on the housing strategy as we move into this new year, and I look forward to overwhelming support right across the council for the approach that we're taking.
Thank you, David. Well, as somebody who was with Richard and others who were first involved in setting up New Place, I think it was fair to say that it was not universally supported across the council, and indeed, as Councillor Carter says, the first election possible after this, there were members of this council saying they would sell it off at the highest possible bid. And I think that when you speak to residents of New Place, they are telling you a number of things. First, they like the security of New Place. I spoke to a family who live in a New Place property who has a child who's autistic, who went from a private landlord address to a private landlord address to a private landlord address. And the amount of uncertainty and damage that it did to that child was immense. They now know that on a New Place property, as long as there's a Labour administration in control of this council, that property will be safe, it will not be sold off, and they can stay in that property as long as they want to. And that type of certainty is huge. And I think we talk about a number of things as a council: employment, educational attainment, pride in your community. But if you don't get housing right and you don't get people to be able to have an investment in their communities and in their homes, then it's very difficult then to look at other things. So I'm absolutely thrilled at the success of New Place. I know it's been copied elsewhere, which I welcome, and our teams are available for consultancy hire. But we will continue to grow this and extend it. And I hope that those people who were so critical and so negative and in fact voted against it and then said they were going to sell it off will at least now accept with some good grace that they were completely wrong. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you both. We're moving forward then. I just lost my place, bear with me. So the next Cabinet paper is item 8, which is the Land Deal and the Growth Fund. David Wright.
Thanks, Leader. This report is another positive good news story that links into the point I made earlier about working as a constructive creative council, working with business and the private sector to secure investment in our borough, whether it be through housing, whether it be through securing new business into Telford or protecting existing businesses and allowing them to grow. The Telford Land Deal, as the report outlines, is a 10-year partnership between Telford and Wrekin Council, the Marches Local Enterprise Partnership and Homes England. It was signed in March 2016. In terms of headlines within the report, headline achievements, between 2015-16 and 2018-19, the overall process has delivered the sale of a total of 21 commercial sites and 10 sites for residential development, with a gross sales income of £27.3 million. This has secured employment floor space of over 82,000 square metres and enabled the delivery of 1,114 new jobs and 617 new homes. Now, one or two people have said to me, what does this actually mean in terms of business? Well, if you look at the report, particularly page 45, you can see testimony from local businesses in particular about the work they do with the local authority in terms of both locating here and expanding here. And the report outlines a whole series of offers and take-up by businesses to ensure that Telford remains vibrant in terms of jobs within the economy. So what we have seen is new companies locating into the town, but we've also seen companies moving within the town to new premises and expanding. And if we weren't doing this activity, the real danger is that they would look elsewhere if they wanted to expand their business. So we've seen a number of internal moves within Telford that have seen businesses grow and expand, and that's really, really good. And there are a couple of examples there, Empire Metals and Training and Sprinkler Tech Limited, that show very clearly how businesses are working very well with the council, with council officers who provide a bespoke service, really, talking about land availability, what kind of support businesses need and how we can help them. And that's part of the dialogue that we need to have with businesses right across the town. In 2018-19, we achieved a gross sales income of £2.2 million, employment floor space of just under 12,000 square metres, and enabled the delivery of 161 jobs, new jobs. So you can see year on year that this land deal is delivering for us as a borough. The forecast for this financial year is gross sales income of £5.9 million, employment floor space secured of over 36,000 square metres, and we will enable the delivery of 375 jobs and 144 new homes. Now, this activity is backed up by the Telford Growth Fund. Between 2016 and 17, 2018-19, we've seen £43 million invested to date across a range of assets linked to long-term lettings of between 8 and 15 years. And investments are estimated to deliver an ongoing gross return of 7.3%, 4.8% after borrowing, and enabling a growth in business rates of approximately £500,000 per annum. Now, it's easy to sweep over some of these figures. They're big numbers, and I'm glad to say they're big numbers. But what they do is generate profit that we can invest in services. And as Councillor Carter said in his opening remarks in relation to funding services, with the budget pressures that we have as a local authority, we can use the income generated from some of this activity to roll on employment growth and housing development by investing in new sites and new businesses. But we can also take some of the profits that we generate and invest them in frontline services. So we've seen a double benefit here, in fact a triple benefit. We're seeing quality new housing sites brought forward for people within our town. We're seeing businesses given stability and opportunities to invest in our borough, and we're seeing income coming into the local authority, which helps us protect frontline services. So this is good news on a number of levels for the local authority. It draws great benefit. It shows how we can work in partnership if we're given the tools, ourselves with the LEP and ourselves with government through Homes England. And if we work together jointly, and if we were given more opportunities to work together jointly, we could do even more. But this is a pioneering deal that has been established by the local authority here. It works extremely well, and I commend the report to members.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Rog. Lee, anything for yourself?
Oh, again, just to reiterate, it's a report that's almost got too much good news in it, really. There's enough for 3 or 4 good news reports here. You know, David said it's very easy to skim over some of the big things in here. The land deal, one of the first in the country, one of the first types of partnerships in the country signed and delivering. The 50 million growth fund, a huge ambition that we set out 2 or 3 years ago now, that again is paying both in terms of jobs, creating conditions for business to stay, to grow, to relocate here. You know, some of the highlights from that, you know, they're included here in terms of testimonies, but actually, you know, one of the proudest things I've been involved in was the development of the incubator units at Horton Wood. First ones in 25 years. People said, you're daft, there's not a demand for them. They're full. 1 year after being built, they're full. And hopefully there's a lot more to come on this. I think also with an eye to the future as well, it's not ended yet. So within the report you've got NI Park, the Agritech Park there, which is a fantastic department for international trade marketing, that as a high potential opportunity site for Agritech. So it's a fantastic report, and as I say, it's fantastic that we've been able to have firm financial foundations with which we can continue these kind of investments. I think it's important to thank the staff as well, the employees, the whole council, because it is a whole team effort, whether that's the finance staff who check the business plans and sign off the business cases, or the planners, or the people responsible for selling and marketing the units. A fantastic team effort that ultimately jobs, houses, businesses, but is generating an ongoing return. I think it's in a report of just short of 5% ongoing forever and a day for the authority to support frontline services. Brilliant stuff.
Caroline?
Yeah, obviously I wasn't part of the council when this was set up, so it just strikes me as a really innovative kind of project, and you know, I think we were the first to do anything like this, weren't we? So you know, I think that is great, and as Lee says, it is something that's bringing in employment, it's bringing in opportunities for housing, and also bringing in then funding that we can use for services. But I think just as an aside, I think one of the things that kind of really interests me about this, which is a small part of it, but I think it's an important part, is in section 6 of the report around the opportunities for those pieces of land that can't be developed, and that we're not just letting those sit and doing nothing with them. We're actually looking to see how we can utilise those areas of land for biodiversity enhancements, and also looking at how then, which will link into the local plan review as well, how we connect up all those open spaces that are good for wildlife. That allows wildlife to expand populations, to spread around, and that's really important in the face of climate change, that we're building in resilience in terms of our biodiversity as well. So you know, that's something that I really welcome, and I think it's a virtuous circle, because if you have a really, you know, green and a wildlife rich environment in your borough, which we do, and we're enhancing that, then that also makes us then an attractive place for people to relocate, both for business and to live, and so it you know, I think it helps and so creates that virtuous circle. So you know, I think there's lots in this report, and we shouldn't forget those small things as well around those biodiversity impacts.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Richard?
All I'd like to add is is the last two reports have had real people's comments on there, real stories, and it's really great to see the impact that these type of initiatives do in our town. You know, when you have businesses saying why they've moved, what it's doing for their business to create more jobs, to expand, it shows that it's not just money that we're talking about, and the initiatives that we have to try and secure our budgets and to invest in frontline services, but it's real stories showing that real people are benefiting from this investment that we're making.
Any comments or questions for yourself, Andrew? No. I just want to say, just want to pick up a couple of points if I can. I think when the land deal was signed, there was a talk of a liability land being transferred over to us. And I think we were a little bit cautious about that, but actually I think, picking up Carolyn's point, actually that just gives us a huge opportunity to protect even more green space than we've protected. You know, this administration's protected more green space over the last 8 years, and in the council's history it's created more local nature reserves than ever before. It's safeguarded through the Green Guarantee more green spaces than ever before, so this gives us another opportunity for that. And I also just think, just picking up on the £50 million growth fund, it was one of my first acts as leader to do that with Lee. And I think at the time people thought we were slightly bonkers, that we were looking to invest such a significant amount of money in our property investment portfolio. But actually, again, if you look at elsewhere across the country, councils are now increasingly copying that idea, because we are using money that we can secure at a relatively low rate because of who we are, investing in that in our town, creating jobs and opportunities and housing, and a strong local economy, and returning a profit which then goes into frontline services. And I think that for those who said at the time that they were against that type of investment, they should have the grace now to say that they were wrong and support this scheme. All those in favour? That's everybody, thank you. Thank you. Item 9 then is school funding formula. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you. Report before you today is regarding the annual review of the school funding formula. We're allocated a dedicated schools grant each year, which has 4 elements: schools, high needs, early years, and the central school services. And while there is a limited flexibility of movement of monies between these areas, this is always done with the approval of our schools forum. All DSG monies is ring-fenced for school spend alone. The final distribution of the dedicated schools grant is usually notified just before Christmas and is based on the October school census figures. In recent years, there's been increasing budget pressures in the high needs area. This is due to changing demographics, changing in legislation without the funding to finance them, and also Telford and Wrekin is a victim of its own success. With our primary schools at 93% good or outstanding, many parents choose Telford and Wrekin, especially because of the great provision for high needs within our schools. Whilst there has been additional funding for high needs recently, this is not sufficient and does not remove the pressures in the area of need across the country. The Department of Education is continuing to move towards the national funding formula, which is benefiting our schools with an increase of 6.8% per pupil. But it must be stressed that this is because of the historic underfunding of Telford and Wrekin schools. So whilst this is good news for our schools and it vindicates our long-standing belief that mainstream school funding for Telford and Wrekin schools has previously been held at an unacceptable low level by the Department for Education. However, this extra money will only enable us to catch up with the level of funding received by other authorities and is not over and above what we should have already been receiving. The local funding formula was discussed with the school forum in September, and it was agreed to continue to move towards the national funding formula as and when this funding is allocated by the Department of Education. The funding formula increases the funding for schools with less deprived intakes who currently receive little from the funding factors linked to deprivation and low prior attainment. Locally, we continue to provide the highest minimum funding guarantee per pupil that is possible within the constraints of the available resources for all schools. The highest minimum funding guarantee will also ensure in 2021 no schools will experience a real-term decrease in funding per pupil. We continue to use the additional funding to move towards the D&E national funding formula, and it may be possible to adopt this fully in 2021 as the Department for Education completes the transition for previously underfunded local authorities, of which Telford and Wrekin is one. We will apply the maximum allowed minimum funding per pupil guarantee of 1.84, which will ensure that every school has an increase per pupil at least in line with cost pressures. Schools which have increased their pupil admission numbers or admit additional pupils above this in September 2020 will be funded on the basis of an estimated number. This means that our schools do not have to wait for the funding to reflect the increased pupil numbers, and the schools will not be adversely affected by the usual lag in funding compared to pupil numbers. The actual allocations to schools will only be finalised once confirmed data from the school census is released. Therefore, Cabinet really approval is sought for the principles behind the local school funding formula, not the precise amounts to each school. I therefore move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Any comments or questions on this report? No. Andrew, anything from yourself?
Well, certainly I welcome the additional funding and everything else that's been put in the report. I think it's a good news item. And comes from a government, if I want to quote back what you've been saying, just been given an overwhelming mandate as well. Now I look forward to an easing of austerity and certainly more help, particularly around education, which has been promised. I'm just curious with one thing. This is the second time that primary schools, the outstanding and or better or good or outstanding that they've received, which is full congratulations to the heads, the governing bodies that have done that. What's the percentage of secondary schools?
I'm sure the officers will give that to you. The same with our primaries, they fluctuate all the time depending on the latest data.
Perhaps it's just worth a comment. Yeah. We've seen a number of our secondary schools convert to academy status in recent years. And when they do that, there's an exemption from inspection for at least 18 months. So we're holding a number of schools at the moment who are awaiting those inspections, and we believe, we'll get a good judgment based on my close work and liaison with the chief executives of those academy trusts. So hopefully over this next year, some of those schools will be due for an inspection and we'll get an update. And I think a more inclusive number around our secondary school position.
What does it stand at the moment then?
It's about 59%.
Right, thank you.
Thank Thank you, Shirley. Any other comments or questions on that report? No? Okay, all those in favour? That's everybody, thank you very much. Okay, next item then is item 10, which is Together for Children, a regional adoption agency. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you. The report today provides an update on the progress of the partnership of the Together for Children Adoption Agency. It's a unique partnership arrangement of 4 local authorities working together to find caring, stable and loving homes for looked after children. Partnership was formed after the Department for Education published a paper, Regionalisation of Adoption, which provides local authorities with a very clear directive to form part of the Regional Adoption Agency by 1st of April 2020. This was based upon the Department of Education wanting to reduce the larger number of adoption services by creating larger regional adoption agencies, and this was envisaged that larger delivery models should be able to pool resources and share best practice to better target the recruitment of prospective adopters and speed up the matching and placing of children for adoption. In March 2019, the Cabinet approved the formation of the regional permanency arrangement, which continues to be developed in line with those decisions, with the statutory responsibility for our looked after children remaining with us as corporate parents. This partnership is the first of its kind in the country and is focused on improving the long-term outcomes of all looked after children requiring permanency. It has now appointed a regional head of operations with a single line of accountability to a regional management board. The regional senior leadership team has been formed with a shared purpose to deliver permanency services for families which are locally determined but with clear links to wider local, regional and national priorities. The partnership is seeking to bring about a workforce for each adoption service together to form the Together for Children Regional Adoption Agency. A bit of a mouthful. Key decisions in relation to the workforce will be taken by the Statutory Director of Children's Service and Adult Services in consultation with myself, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Education. The workforce will have access to training and development opportunities. The 4 authorities are mindful that the future partnership arrangement cannot lead to any increased cost pressures because of the development of the partnership, and that also no member of the partnership will be disadvantaged because of the arrangement. It's recommended that the regional finance formula for 2021 and 21-22 is set on the basis that each partner contributes 100% of the in-scope budgets, and it will also recommend that the partner local authorities will remain responsible for any additional costs, pressures such as significant increases for demand, etc. This approach will ensure financial certainty for the partnership in the short term while ensuring local authorities are insulated from potential financial risk as a result of the new arrangement. Furthermore, it will allow the partnership and the 4 local authorities to take informed financial decisions both in the medium and long term to achieve financial sustainability in meeting the changing needs of looked after children. In order to form the Together for Children Regional Adoption Agency, we need to enter into a formal interagency agreement with the legal and government representative of each partner, and the agreement will be for 3 years up until the 31st of March 2023, with an option to extend, but it can be terminated by a 12 months notice at any time. The Together for Children will operate through a hub and a spoke model which will enable local authorities to benefit from a network of regional delivery whilst maintaining our own independence, with the statutory responsibilities relating to looked after children continuing to sit with each authority. So corporate parenting, agency decision maker, care planning, placement and care review, all those will remain with the local authority. Benefits will be around the shared knowledge, recruitment of adopters, sharing best practice and speeding up the matching and placing of children with adoptive parents. The Together for Children will go live on the 1st of April and we will continue to work with stakeholders to co-produce the development of this new model. On the 1st of April we will move into phase 2 and the partnership will return to the Cabinet for the 4 authorities to get that approval for phase 2. Therefore, the consideration for Cabinet today is to confirm the delivery of the Regional Adoption Agency for April this year and to confirm the commitment to the broader ambition of the delivery of wider permanence model going forward, and noting the regional financial formula being set with each of the authorities is currently in scope. I therefore recommend motion 2.1 to 2.4.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. That seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Richard. Carry on.
Yeah, I welcome the development of this partnership, and I particularly welcome the fact that it's been structured in a way that retains that responsibility within our local authority for our our children, our looked after children, and also the agency decision making still sitting with us as a local authority rather than moving to a full sort of regional adoption agency. So I think that partnership approach is exactly the right way to go. And I'm not normally a person who thinks bigger is better, but I think in this case, and that ability to have that sort of broader geography really is really beneficial. I'll sort of, I know the partnership is much broader than adoption, but adoption is something I suppose I know a bit more about. For social workers, that decision to remove children from birth families is a huge decision. It's not something that's ever taken lightly, and that's because social workers are fully aware of the impact that has on the children. You know, that initial separation has a lifelong impact, and so it's absolutely crucial when that decision is taken and children are going to be put up for adoption, that the right forever family is found, because children to then go through adoption breakdown and a second disruption is just horrific. So for me, that ability to cast that net wider is really, really beneficial. The matching process is much more than a paper exercise. There's a chemistry to it as well, and so I think just that ability to be able to make sure that we get our children, because there are children once they come into our care, the right family, and being able to look around on a regional level is really welcome, but we retain that control, we retain that responsibility, we retain that decision making function. So I really welcome this partnership.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Andrew, any comments from yourself?
I welcome it.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much. We now move on to the Youth Justice Plan. We welcome our colleagues from the West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner's Office. Shirley, you'll take us through this report?
Again, another which may appear on paper quite a dry report, but a very vital and important report. So today it's the Youth Justice Plan for 1920. Every youth justice service is required to produce an annual youth justice plan which outlines how the justice services in the area are provided, funded and composed. The plan has been prepared by the Youth Justice Service in line with the content requirements published on the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales on behalf of the Secretary of State. As required by the board, this plan has been approved by the West Mercia Youth Justice Service Management Board. It provides a high-level review of the previous year, including information on the service performance against 3 national youth justice outcome measures set out, and it sets out our key actions for 1920 in the delivery plan under the 4 main priority areas: our people, our partnerships, our performance, quality in practice and our governance. The Youth Justice Service is subject to 3 national indicators, and Telford and Wrekin specific information is provided in the plan on pages 20 to 22. The information shows the most recent published status for the use of custody, which shows that Telford and Wrekin rate was at 0.12 compared to the national average of 0.32. The reoffending indicator also details 3.12, which again is better than the national rate of 3.9. The youth justice system's main aim actually is to prevent the offending and the reoffending of children and young people. I'd like to thank the officers for their work in producing the plan, which sets out an action plan for the future service delivery improvement, and I therefore recommend 2.1, the Youth Justice Plan 1920, for approval and cabinet endorsement.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Keith, anything from yourself you want to pick up?
Unless anyone's got any
specific questions. No. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Andrew, anything from yourself? Shirley says it's a dry report in many ways, but however, it's a very important report, and those who do offend are also some of our most vulnerable children in our borough, so it's important that we take the report seriously. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much indeed. We'll then move on to our next report. Just allow a change of officers at the officers' table. So this is our council tax reduction scheme for 2020-2021. Councillor Mehta.
Thank you, Leader. There are a number of reasons driving the need to change our current council tax support scheme. There's an increasing need to rebalance the distribution of the available council tax support funding to ensure that it's being used to support the most financially vulnerable applicants. These are often customers in receipt of universal credit, job seekers allowance or income support. In our current scheme, customers in this group have to pay at least 25% towards their council tax, with the non-working single customers receiving just under £74 per week universal credit. This can represent up to 30% of their weekly income that they are required to pay in council tax. Appendix C in your report provides a working example of how the new scheme will work. It's become apparent more recently that this group, more than any, is struggling to afford the contributions to council tax, whereas those in our protected groups who have the highest income levels often been asked to pay nothing at all. In addition, the current scheme also doesn't operate effectively with the universal credit, which is now being deployed in our borough by the Department for Works and Pensions. In order to seek views on the proposals, we undertook a 6-week public consultation exercise with many of our key stakeholders, including CAB and customers who are currently in receipt of council tax support. The responses demonstrated that the majority of respondents were in favour of the changes, with 61% support for the proposed new banded scheme and 24% who were not. The new scheme will retain a number of incomes that will be discarded to protect vulnerable customers, including child benefit, disability living allowance, personal independence payments, armed forces independence payments, war widow pensions, to list just a few. Therefore, these proposed changes still offer significant concessions for customers who are in receipt of disability-related benefits or war disablement-related payments. In support of customers who are genuinely unable to afford their council tax contributions, they will be advised to apply for support from our Council Tax Hardship Fund. The scheme has been redesigned to ensure that the personalised financial protection can be awarded to the most financially vulnerable customers. The revised council tax hardship policy is outlined in more detail in Appendix B of the report. We will be making direct contact with all customers who will see their entitlement changing by more than £1 per week in advance of the changes. There are currently 30 councils who operate a similar banded style council tax reduction scheme to the one we are proposing, and we are aware that this will increase to around 100 by the next year, many who are receiving universal credit as their main driver. The technical document will not be available until mid-January, ready for full council. However, in the meantime, I move a recommendation for your endorsement.
Thank you, Councillor Matters. That's seconded. Thank you, Lee. Anything for yourself, Lee?
No, I think Raj has pretty much captured everything. It's always a difficult area, this one. We're not seeking any savings from this budget. The envelope is the envelope. But we've always got to have one eye on the fact that more and more people are living with financial insecurity and actually could be tipped into requiring this support, and that could escalate that budget outside that envelope. Ultimately, this is driven, and you've seen that 30 councils already adopt the system. I think another 70 are due to adopt the system. But ultimately, everyone has cited changes to welfare reform and universal credit, which the impact of which has made us have to change the current council tax support system. I think Lee and Rebecca in particular, you've been through iteration after iteration of this to make sure that we get a fair system, that it continues to be fair, that it continues to direct support and target support at those who need it most. And thank you for your diligence in that. Thank you for the thorough consultation, and thank you for being thorough in terms of looking elsewhere to see what others are doing, and not being not being afraid to embrace some of that methodology.
Thank you very much. Andrew, anything for yourself?
Yeah, I welcome this. I think it's far better to have some sort of targeted scheme like this so we can deliver for our local community. I'm rather curious about the consultation, the size of it, and what were the reasons for people opposing the scheme itself?
It is a rebalance of the current funding available. So within that scheme, obviously, although the people who are the most financially vulnerable are going to be significantly better off under the scheme, there are some people that will see some reduction in their income. So that would be one of the contributing factors, undoubtedly.
What was the size of the response, do you know?
Got the figures to hand, Becky?
I think it was 116 actually responded.
Out of was
we
it
did
5,000 odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but we did did everything we could to try and contact as many as we could through every mechanism possible.
Right, thanks.
I also welcome the fact, as Raj said, every claimant who is going to be affected by more than £1 a week will be written to personally in advance of these changes, and of course signposted to the hardship fund, because of course it does take some time to sort out your personal budget, doesn't it, for a change. Right, okay, thank you very much indeed. That has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 13, which is our last item for today, which is the review of the Telford Wrekin local plan, protect, care and invest to create a better borough. Councillor David Wright.
Thank you, Leader. This report outlines a proposed review of the local plan. The council are obliged to review the local plan every 5 years from adoption, and now is, in our view, an optimum time to start a review to ensure we maintain an up-to-date local plan going forward. The local plan was adopted 2 years ago. However, the last consultation the council undertook on its publication version of the plan, that's its pre-examination version, was 4 years ago, with most policies being developed by the consultation version, which was consulted on in mid-2015. The point being that the majority of the plan content, bar changes made by the inspector, is actually 5 years old now, and the world has moved on with changed economic circumstances, obviously, and quite rightly an increasing global, national and local focus on climate change. So what are the benefits for a review at the moment? Well, it maintains the competitiveness of the borough both regionally and nationally by having a review of the local plan and an updated local plan. There are opportunities for regeneration in our town and district centres, and these are key priorities that local members tell us about. They want to see us focusing on our local towns, our local centres, to secure their regeneration. And it also, and this is very important, puts us in a better position to resist speculative development by maintaining an up-to-date plan. Certainty around our long-term planning for infrastructure can also be put in place, and this it relates to schools and investment in highways and transport. A review provides an opportunity to address climate change, as I've said, and integrate it into our planning process, particularly for new developments, and to meet the council's aspirations for the borough to move towards carbon neutrality. There is an opportunity through a review to underpin the delivery of other corporate plans, including the local transport plan, the economic development strategy, and we've already talked today about things like the land deal and the growth fund, and it also gives us opportunities to ensure that we continue to develop and review our housing strategy. There are 4 key objectives proposed to underpin this review of the local plan. Firstly, employment-led growth through inward investment and job creation. It's crucially important that we identify sites for employment growth. We're doing extremely well, as we've already heard on reports earlier on the agenda, in terms of retaining and attracting businesses. What we need to ensure is that we have a good supply of high quality land for investment and job creation. Secondly, we want the review to focus on a forest community approach, which affords protection, enhancement and accessibility of the natural environment and green spaces, and they characterise our borough. One of the great benefits of the Newtown process was that the Development Corporation was visionary in terms of laying out woodland space, open space, much of which this administration has protected in recent years. We want to go further by focusing on this forest community agenda and looking at how we can further enhance our natural environment and further protect areas of green space and environment, natural environment within the borough. Thirdly, we want to support the regeneration of our borough towns, as I mentioned earlier. Our Newtown estates particularly, many of our Newtown estates are now 40, 50 years old and need investment to ensure that they have a long-term viability in the future, which they do, and we need to ensure that we invest in them and protect them. And we also want to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place across the town to support our town. Fourthly, we want to meet local housing needs. And I know there's been some speculation in the media about calls for development, but what I want this review and what this Cabinet wants this review to focus on in particular is providing affordable and specialist accommodation opportunities and ensuring that we support people to live longer and live healthier at home. So the key housing focus of this review will be around affordable and specialist accommodation. If you look at the report, it is accompanied by 2 further documents which support the review process. There's the local development scheme. We're required to publish an LDS as part of the process, and the attached version is recommended for Cabinet approval. And there's a statement of community involvement, which I think is extremely important, and this sets out the way the local planning authority will involve the local community, stakeholders and statutory bodies in the review of the local plan. And Cabinet's being asked to approve the attached version of that for publication today. This is an incredibly important document, this report. It focuses on a review of the local plan. It is a review. We are not setting out to rewrite the entire local plan through this process. The local plan as it sits and as it exists guides our activity as a planning authority. This is a review of that process, and it focuses, as I've said, on the 4 key objectives that I've outlined in the report and in my presentation. So I hope that members will be able to support this. It will enable us to move forward through a series of stages over the coming couple of years to ensure that our local plan is fit for purpose, that encourages employment growth, protects green spaces and gives people affordable and supported housing options right across the borough.
Thank you, David. Any comments or questions in regards to this, Andy?
Yes, I think it's worth just emphasising the point that Councillor Wright made about specialist and supported accommodation, and just how crucial that is to our strategy as a local authority going forward in terms of providing people with the means to live in their own homes rather than requiring residential care. It's central to our adult social care objectives that we talk about asset-based, and one of the biggest assets of all is the home, if it's the right kind of home, if it's the home that can enable people to live with support in their own accommodation. It's what we want for them, it's what they want for themselves, more importantly. And if we get that right in terms of our housing strategy going forward, then a lot of other things fall in place. So I endorse particularly that section of this report in terms of review of the housing of the local plan. Very important to us as a local authority and very important to our residents, I think.
Thank you, Andy. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I welcome the review of the local plan. I don't have any scars from the last time we put in the local plan, because it was a well consulted local plan. But I do recognise the issues of the regeneration of our borough towns and new town estates, which is key, that we can use this plan to look at reviewing that. But also the thing that stands out the most is the forest community. You know, as you said before, David, you know, the natural environment and the green spaces that characterise this borough, we're going to invest more in that, and we're also going to look to enhance that to make this town somewhere where people, as we all know and welcome, the benefits of the green environment. You know, it's good for our health and well-being. It's good that it's a selling point for our town, for businesses to invest here. And you know, and reviewing this local plan will help us stop speculative developments coming forward. You know, with the national planning policies that the government keep whipping up slowly to try and create building everywhere. But we want to make sure that it's good development, affordable and special accommodation, as Andy says, is key, because people are living longer, people are getting some of the dementias and things that we don't want us to all have, but we know we have to make sure we support those people as they get older to still live in their own home and not put pressures on our health service.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, just adding to Richard's point really around, as David said, this isn't a replacement of local plan, it is about reviewing, and I think it is the right time to review, particularly because the world has moved on, and particularly around the climate change agenda. And I think it gives us that opportunity, as Richard said, building on that forest community approach, but also looking at how we locally can set policies that encourage more energy efficiency in our developments. I think the thing that we really need to see, though, is that sort of push from nationally, because we can only do so much locally on that front, because developers, you know, we sort of, they're working in a national market, and unless they have that kind of impetus with national regulation, it's a bit harder for us to encourage that locally, but you know, certainly the review gives us the opportunity to try and set that out as much as we can.
Thank you. Andrew, any comments or questions on this?
Yes, like David was right. This is a key issue. It's a key process as well. I can't help but think that we're missing a trick with this, because I believe it is driven by housing numbers. I see in the report it's not going to be based on that. I think it should be, because that affects everything from climate change, local transport, education, health, green spaces. Now, last time I looked, the housing need numbers was actually calculated by the ONS rather than the government, and they were considerably less than the numbers that we actually were saddled with at the time that the plan went through. I think we should challenge this, and I think this council should challenge housing numbers to try and deal with this, to reduce the housing numbers and the impact that those housing numbers will have. Another affecting factor in this could well be Brexit, which may reduce the demand on housing as well. Who knows what will happen there? But I think it is an opportunity, and I really would like to see this council grasp that and start to challenge the government on housing numbers. You've got two Conservative MPs that are members of that government. Use them. They have quite a mandate from local people to do that. And I think there's widespread concern across the borough on the impact of continual house development that's having, as I say, on many of our essential services. We've talked about local transport, we've talked about education, and continuing to build houses up to the current level is going to put a strain on all of those. The other issue, from what I remember of attending the inquiry, was the inspector himself was very critical of the council over the site's allocations criteria that was used, and the way that some of the sites were arrived at, and the balance between public and privately owned sites. That is something, again, that we need to address and to make sure that that is done properly. But it is an opportunity, Dave. It's a key opportunity here. If you wanted to challenge the government on this, on housing numbers or anybody else, we'd be right alongside you to do that.
Well, there is a difficulty with some of the issues Councillor Eade raises, because this is a review of the local plan, and unfortunately we cannot rewrite and tear up the previous local plan. That would cost us millions of pounds. We'd have to go back out to consultation, and we'd also be open to high levels of speculative development in terms of site allocation and preparation. So there is a real danger that if we don't carry out this review in a very structured and measured way, we will be accused by the planning inspector and the government of reopening the local plan, which is not what we're doing. And that would put us in a great deal of danger in terms of us having constant appeals against planning application decisions undertaken by the authority, and we'd find ourselves potentially in a very, very difficult position in terms of developers. In terms of the longer term 5-year housing land supply, it's crucial that we take a balanced approach, and that we have an opportunity to see where we're going as a borough, matching up that housing land supply with employment growth. And what concerns me is, if we're not careful, and the Centre for Cities report talked about this, we need to identify more employment land within the borough so that we can sustain the long-term growth of the town. We don't want to be a town where people live and commute into the conurbation. I'm sure Andrew would agree with that. We want to be a town that sustains itself in terms of employment. But there is a real danger that if we're not careful with this process, we'll be accused of ripping up the local plan. We'll be open up to challenge in terms of the planning process, and that means that developers will be able to come forward, if we don't have a clear 5-year land supply, come forward with sites for approval, and when they end up with a planning inspector, they get waved through. The clue's in the name. It's called planning, and that's what this process and this review enables us to do. And I want it to focus upon the key themes that I've outlined. I want it to focus very clearly on opportunities for employment growth and inward investment in job creation. I wanted to focus on the forest community principle of protecting and enhancing open and green space. I wanted to look at regeneration, so I wanted to focus on the key towns we have in the borough and also on the new town estates to ensure we can deliver their regeneration and continue to see them as successful local centres. And I want very much the council to focus in its approach on housing on affordable and specialist housing provision. We're about to publish one of the most pioneering pieces of work ever undertaken by a local authority in terms of outlining what our specialist and supported housing needs are, and I'll come back to Cabinet with more detail on that in the coming months. We're one of the first councils in the country that's outlining the kind of level of specialist and supported housing we need. We need to identify sites in order to deliver that, and that involves creating partnerships. So it's not about ripping up the local plan, which opens us up into a whole world of danger. It's about reviewing the local plan, making sure it's fit for purpose as we move forward.
Thank you, David. I think one of the things I would say in regards to the government's approach, I welcome the opportunity to work with our members of Parliament. I've written to both of them before Christmas asking to meet with them at their earliest convenience so we can start to look at how we lobby the government with their strong mandates, but with our strong mandate too. Two elections, two very different outcomes, but in the same year. And I look forward to working with MPs on that. I think we have to be honest with our communities, though. The Conservative government has a manifesto commitment to build 300,000 new homes each and every year, and those houses will have to be built somewhere. And it's not honest to say to residents that we can stop house building here in Telford Wrekin. And one of my big frustrations is that we're not an NIMBY planning council. We are building houses, but when we refuse and reject house building, the government planning inspector time and time again overturns our objection and favours with the developers. Now, I would hope that we can work with MPs to strengthen the localism agenda that the government used to talk about, which is if a local planning authority says no to house building, and there are good reasons for that, that is then supported nationally rather than being overturned nationally, which happens. I also think it's worth saying that this current local plan was a plan based upon less housing numbers than the Conservative administration wanted in 2010. The regional spatial strategy that you signed the forward to proposed significantly more houses than this plan allowed for. And the reality of the situation is that had we have gone to the local planning inspector and argued for even more less houses than we did, he would have refused to sign off the local plan, which would have led to speculative development. Now, you can be honest or play politics on this issue, and we are being honest on this. It was a core central plank of the Conservative opposition's election campaign in 2019 and in 2015 about planning and the local plan, and they were defeated both times. I do hope, therefore, Andrew...
4,000 more votes than you did in the first election.
Well, we're talking about councillors. You know how it works, Andrew. I think...
That was quite a rejection by the local community, I put it to you.
Well, we remained in power, and in a few months ago, you recorded one of your worst election results ever, and one of our best. So let's work together in this new political context, but let's not play dishonest games with the community on this issue, because the community are more grown up than some politicians give them credit for. That has been proposed, it has been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody, thank you. And that brings our Cabinet meeting to an end. Thank you very much.